Good morning and welcome to the December 11th edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Short News. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. Today I want to talk about Angela Merkel and Germany. So over the weekend, as many of you probably know by now, Angela Merkel stepped down as the head of the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, which she's been in charge of for the past 13 or so years, something like that, since she's been chancellor. And this is seen as a major concession on her part to the devastating losses that both her CDU, Bavaria's CSU, her sister party that she's in coalition with, and the Social Democrats, which make up the coalition that forms the German government, they've all taken terrible losses at the polls. And commensurately, we've seen the rise on the left of the Greens and on the right of Alternative for Germany, or otherwise known as AfD. And that's, to populists or to lovers of freedom like myself. And this move towards populism, even in Germany, is very, very significant because German political turmoil is one of the real potential flashpoints for a European-wide sovereign debt crisis. Remember, Deutsche Bank shares are in the gutter right now, and there's no hope of them improving, I don't think, because of the massive imbalances that have built up within the European banking system thanks to a decade's worth of QE, which European Central Bank President Mario Draghi can't exit from. And he's going to be making his policy decision very soon, as will the Fed here in the United States, as to what they're going to do interest rate wise, whether the Fed's going to raise interest rates, whether Draghi's going to finally admit that he can't stop buying European sovereign debt lest the whole thing explode. But that's the issues. Those are the issues that are behind the headlines of this political infighting that's happening in Europe, within Germany itself. And this is mirrored. We've talked about yesterday. We talked about Britain. The day before, I talked about France. I've talked about Italy in the past. All of these things are evidence of a rising wave of, I would say, constructive nationalism, people wanting to retain their culture and wanting to, if they're going to integrate new ideas into their culture, they want to do it on their terms, at their speed, not at the speed of their government, which is obviously moving at a much faster pace with this immigration policy, which is what Merkel's in trouble for politically, domestically, over that mass immigration of the type and kind that they have seen is unacceptable to most people. Doesn't matter whether they're French or Italian or German or Dutch or American or Chinese or Mongolian, it doesn't matter. People have culture, and cultural vampires like George Soros and others who maintain that we should all have our culture stripped away from us are vile and need to be opposed at every level. Moreover, not only do they need to be opposed on moral reasons and just basic human nature reasons, they need to be opposed because the ideas of an open society mask a real totalitarian drive to just control everything, control the capital, to control the people, and to control the wealth. That's what this is truly all about. So Merkel steps down as the head of the CDU, and Annagrette Kramp-Karrenbauer, her protege, wins a narrow victory over Friedrich Merz, who's more backed by the conservative elements within the CDU, and really the German industrial wing, the German industrialists who were allied with the party. And so from Merkel's perspective, and what I'm seeing here is that this is really just another moment of meet the new boss, same as the old boss. They're trying to maintain status quo. And that's fine. It's not going to work. They tried it with Emmanuel Macron. It's not working in France. They tried it. They're trying to do it by betraying Brexit In Britain, it's not going to work. Now, in Germany, from what I understand, the political situation is a little bit more, relatively speaking, conservative. And I mean conservative in the sense of that they don't like radical change. The Germans are not down with this. They would prefer the dominant parties to adopt the complaints of the quote-unquote fringe parties and to keep them in charge, but adopt these more populist positions. And that's why we've seen the Greens take voter share from the Social Democrats. And that's why we've seen AfD take voter share from both the CSU and the CDU, for the most part. It's a simplification, but it's good enough for this discussion. Most of this has been an anti-Merkel move. Greens want the Social Democrats to stop supporting her so that they can win some votes back and they can gain more political power. And AfD simply wants Merkel deposed from power because they fundamentally disagree with her. They think she's a fake conservative, which she is, and everything else. And that's fine. AfD needs to rebrand itself, as I've been saying for months, as a party, as a solution party for all Germans, and not just an anti-Merkel protest party. They're in the Bundestag now. They need to start acting like a real party. I haven't been following it very closely as to whether they have or not, but the polls, their polling numbers have stagnated right at the 16% chasm. That chasm they need to cross in order to rebrand themselves and become a major party, a major political concern going forward. Otherwise, they're going to go the way of UKIP. They're going to go the way of other failed political protests in the past. I expect the Greens to settle back once the Social Democrats break the coalition with the CDU-CSU, which I think will happen once we get to a sovereign debt crisis sometime in 2019. And certainly if they're routed at the European parliamentary elections. But because of all of these reasons, because of the confidence, as I've been talking about in previous episodes, of the political process, the political leaders across Europe need to maintain their air of invulnerability. Because if that air of invulnerability pops, they don't look like they are the inevitable consequence of European politics. The whole thing will come crashing down very quickly. Very quickly. Because everybody will just look and go, look, the emperor's naked. And God forbid we all ever see Angela Merkel naked. So that's why the EU won't even budge now on Brexit talks, even though it's very obvious Theresa May can't force feed this thing through, this deal through that they've wanted from the beginning. But they can't negotiate. They have to maintain this air of, we are in charge, we have leverage, we don't negotiate, we dictate. And they're acting like they have that power, but they really don't. What they have are satraps doing their job publicly for them, making it look like they're dictating. And they're really not. They're dictating, but only because they're dealing with people who are on their side. Right? The proof, however, and I'm going to show you a couple of charts in a minute. I hope I get this right. The proof that things are beginning to really change are going to show up in the markets. The markets will always be a handicap. That's what they are. They're a handicap of future events. They discount current events into the future. What they do, they're a discounting process. And when you start to look at what the markets are doing, and I'm only going to show you two charts today. I could show you 100, but I'm going to show you two. It's what I think are the most important. To give you an idea of where I think capital is and what their mindset is and what they're thinking about what's happening for 2019 are the following. The first thing to talk about is the gold price in euros. Now, the gold price, we always quote it in dollars, but it's important to look at the gold price in euros as well, because we're talking about gold is always a hedge against political unrest, right? The change in political sentiment Well, look at what's happening here. While gold in dollars is struggling, relatively speaking, is struggling down here because the dollar's been stronger than the euro. The euro price of gold has very rapidly risen from around 1,010 euros to nearly 1,100 in just a 9 or 10 week period. And we had a technical breakout above this 1093.87 level last week with a close above that level, and now we're pushing through this week. I can tell you today, just watching price action in the markets today, the gold is holding up very well in dollars, while the euro is continuing to fall back towards $1.13. That's a bad sign. That means that's a sign that people are moving to cash and they're moving out of sovereign assets. So now let's go one step further and let's look at the German DAX. And the German DAX doesn't believe Merkel at all. This is the monthly chart of the German DAX. You'll note earlier in the year, well, it peaked early last year, but look at the incredible downtrend that we're seeing here. The German DAX is off 30% from its high a year ago. And these last 3 months, since the political turmoil, especially over Brexit, has intensified. Note a collapse in October below the support level, and then all of these moves in Q4 are horrific. And as a matter of fact, the German DAX for 2018 is going to close well below the 2017 low. That's also a very bearish signal. So markets are saying they don't believe you, Merkel, that you've been able to maintain the status quo here. So in the short term, you may see, a pole bounce, which we're already starting to see, a pole bounce for Merkel and the establishment German parties, and a little bit of a retrograde on the part of the opposition parties, but don't believe it. As we move into 2019 and we start getting closer and closer to the European parliamentary elections, that's when the numbers are going to change. And that's when things get really, really interesting. So I want you to watch those things right now because I think that's really important. Okay, so that's what I've got for you this morning. If you liked what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. That'd be great. You can follow my work over at tomluongo.me. You can also follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. And you can support my work over at Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns. This has been the Gold Goats and Guns short news for Tuesday, December 11th, 2018. You guys have a great day and keep your stick on the ice.